Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, welcome back to School of Geography YouTube page. And today, I'm just going to give you all some tips on how to prepare for the exam, some geo study tips. So, I'm just going to give you all some time to log in before I start the live. Hi, if you're there, good afternoon. You can comment in the chat below. Good afternoon, you all. How are you all doing today? I know it's Saturday, and that is why I'm not doing a lesson in particular, but just to give you all some study tips and guidance on how to study for your exam because I'm sure this weekend a lot of you all are very busy preparing for not just your geography exam, but all of the exams that you have. So I'm glad to see that some of you all are on today. Hi, Calicia. Nice to have you on today. Hi, Lennis. Lenice. Lenice. How are you today? How are you all? Good afternoon. Yes, CSEC is next week. Geography CSEC is the 8th of July, which is my birthday. So I most likely will have to go in school and greet my students and settle them for the exam, the life of a teacher. So I am just here to give you all some study tips, because as Lennis just said, we are so close to the exam now, literally like a couple weeks, and yes, normalish. Right? Well, at least that's okay. You're good. Calician, how are you? How are you? Oh, thanks, thanks. You know what would be even better is if you all do very well on the exam. So I am just on. I know it's Saturday. You're probably busy preparing for all of your other exams that you have in addition to geography. So I'm just here to give you all some study tips on how to study wise for your exam, because if you are at this point and you still have not looked through the syllabus, one of the first things that you should do in preparation for your exam is to study with the syllabus. So I will just start. So let's get into it. So the geography exam, you all should know, is split into four sections. You have the map reading section, you have the natural systems section, the human system, and the human natural systems, which was previously known as the environmental section. But they merged it together, and now it's actually one one component, which is called human natural systems. Miss, I'm good, a little bit nervous. Y'all will do well because I can see that y'all are putting in the work and you are on this, which is saying a lot about your dedication to studying and wanting to do very well in your exams. So that is very good. Calicia, just I don't know if you all believe in God, but whoever you believe in, say a prayer and you should be fine. So the exam, let's talk about studying wisely. So the first thing I would recommend is getting your syllabus and also looking at the broad topics that is coming for the exam in conjunction with your syllabus. So very important is is using your syllabus to help you get through, that particular when you're studying to give you some guidance as to what will be on your your exam and how to study for it. So, and then, of course, a map work. Good afternoon, Faith. Nice to see you on. How are you, Faith? How are you today? So, we're just going through some, you know, I'm going to share some tips on how to study for the exam because the exam is in less than probably 2 weeks. It's actually on the 8th, so I am here just to show you all, how to prepare wisely, or give you all some tips, I should say, how to prepare wisely. So for map reading, everything that we have done so far, in addition to your skills, in terms of, you have to learn all the skills like distances, line, how to measure distances using a line and a curved distance, angular bearing, compass direction using 16 point, 4 and 6 figure grid referencing, how to be able to identify relief features. And I'm going to do this next week. Next class, I'm going to do this, how to identify relief features on the map, how to draw a cross section, how to be able to identify features along a cross section from off the map, and all of the landscape descriptions in terms of what we did. The only way to perform very well on your geography map work section of the exam is practice. So the first thing I would suggest is, if you all have, do you all have a map reading book? I would suggest getting a map reading book. Oh, you're actually in four. That's nice that you're on field. So by the time next year, Form 5, you would be so good to go. So that is good to hear. Right. So I'm trying to, I'm not too sure if you all know this book, but this is a book that I actually use. It's called The Essential Guide to Map Reading, includes skills and basic technique. The Essential Guide to Map Reading. I'm not too sure if any of you all ever heard about this map reading book, but this is the cover. It came off of my book. This is an excellent map reading book. I'm not too sure what your teacher uses at school, but essentially, this is one of the books I would recommend for map reading. Why? Because this book actually contains the large maps that you actually get on the exam. So it gives you a large map to practice on, not just these tiny ones that you would get from when you purchase the past papers, but you get a full size maps. And there are several maps, about 5 or 6 of them, with questions that you can practice, and they also give you a lot of proper descriptions. So that is one thing that you should have, and practice the skills that you know. Also, get past papers. And I know some of you all may not have the actual maps. So if you can access digital maps that you can practice on, will also be great. But I know, because of the conditions that we're under with the pandemic, you probably did not um, get maps from your teacher to take home. Some students are lucky and they were given the map to take home. So get this map reading book, or get a map reading book, and practice on your own using past paper questions, and pay particular attention to those questions that are 4 marks and 6 marks, because you don't want to lose those marks. The skills question, you can perfect that in a very short time, right? And those are usually 1 marks or 2 marks, but that 4 and 6 questions, 6 mark question under landscape description, is crucial in performing very, very well. So get your map reading book, and also use this map reading book together with the past paper questions and practice. So that is my first tip. The second tip, of course, is to go to your syllabus and see all that is outlined under the map reading section, because you're going to be getting a question on map reading. The second thing I'm going to ask you all to do is go to the back of your syllabus. I'm not too sure if you ever noticed, but if you go straight to the end of your syllabus, you would see that it actually gives you a glossary of terms, right? A glossary of, and they call it behavioral verbs used in geography examination. Why is that important? That is important because it helps you understand what the question is asking. So at the back of the geography syllabus, you would see words like analyze, you would see words like assess, you would see words like classify, you would see words like compare and contrast, define. And each behavioral verb, right, in the exam, they would ask you to examine or to compare and contrast or to define. And it is important to know the words so you know how to answer this question. And usually questions that test what we call the analytical skill or use of analysis. So you have, they mark you in terms of knowledge, which is easy, use of knowledge, right? Basically how you use that knowledge, and then they also mark you on these analytical um, type of questions, which would 6 marks and 4 marks. So define, you would see define, provide a brief statement giving the precise meaning of or outlining the nature, properties, or essential qualities of a term, concept, or principle. Whereas describe is to provide statements of the features or characteristics of an object or process. So it's two different terms, right? So go to the back of the syllabus on page 57. You all can make note of it. Page 57 of the syllabus describes all the behavioral verbs that are used on your examination. That's the first thing that you should do, right? So after you have really um, done that, you should go to the syllabus, go through the map reading section, see what they want you to do, right? And then you can move on to natural systems. So for map work, it's practically going to be everything that you have to study, because you don't know which area they're going to assess from. So you have to know most of it, right? So let us see what are some of the things that they can ask under the map reading section of the exam. Okay, so we just spoke about all those necessary skills that you have to learn for your actual maps. So you would see under content, essential elements of the map, grid references 4 and 6, compass direction 16 point, grid bearings, measuring straight and curved line distances, reducing and enlarging your topo maps, cross section and sketches, right? Very important, including intervisibility. So we're going to do these next week. Calculating gradients, variations in slope, looking at physical features from the map, landscape description in terms of relief, drainage, land use, and then the land use interrelationship and patterns among relief, land use patterns, and drainage, right? You're going to look at also photographs and maps where you have to interpret the photograph, what you see on the photograph, and that usually come in the first part of all your questions in terms of natural human system. The first part of the question, a number one, A is an interpretation of a chart. So you really have to know that, right? You have to know photographs, maps, and diagrams, how to be able to read a map, a diagram, and a graph, like a bar graphs and so forth. Also, to be able to identify whether systems, so they can ask you, especially in the multiple choice of your exam, the paper one, about symbols, whether um, symbols, for example, like how do you interpret wind speed and direction, cloud cover, fronts, etc., rainfall and temperature graphs, location and time, longitude and latitude, very important when we're looking at location and time, longitude and time, countries in the Caribbean, sketch maps, right? And then we talk about interpreting graphs. Then they go on to the natural system section. So in your natural system section, what is coming on your exam under the broad topics, I saw it's going to be weathering and the rock cycle, right? So you go under those topics, you would see describe the formation of the three types of rocks. So you know what is described. If you don't know what is described, you go to the back, right, in the glossary of terms or behavioral verbs that they give you, and you look for what the word describes. So you're describing the formation of the three types of rock in terms of the rock cycle. You define weathering, explain the process of weathering in the content, explain the processes of mass movement, right? And under weathering, you also have to look at mass movement. And mass movement, there are two types of mass movement. There is a slow mass movement and a fast type of mass movement. Anybody know what is a slow type of mass movement called? What is it? Slow type of mass movement. Soil creep is a slow type of mass movement. Very good. And the fast movement is very good, Calicia. And the fast type of movement is, so the fast type of mass movement is called landslides. Very good, Calicia. Right? Soil creep is not really visible, right, until after a long time, and you would see the poles are bent, or trees are bent, or um, there might be a little shift, in terms of ground. But you don't see this until over time because it's very slow. Whereas the opposite of that slow mass movement is our fast mass movement, which is landslide. which basically, takes place due to being under the influence of gravity and things like rainfall contributing to this fast movement, right? So you have to know all of that, describing the three types of rock, weathering, explain the process of weathering, explain the processes of mass movement. So I think that is practically all that you needed to know for natural systems that is on the exam, right? So you have to know that under the human natural systems, what they're giving you is natural hazards and natural disasters and preparedness. So for the exam, again, you go to your syllabus. So that let's make sure that we outline what the actual under the objectives, the specific objectives, what are they? So weathering is objective 5, 6, 7, 8, no 7, right? So up to 5, 6, and 7, that is what you have to know. So you use your syllabus and you go to the glossary of terms, make sure that you understand what these terms involves, and then you go and you study, right? At this point, you should know a lot of this stuff already. If you don't know, I would suggest that you get a textbook, or you have supporting notes that your teacher gave you. But this is the textbook that I use, and this book is the Caribbean Environment for CSEC Geography by Mark Wilson. The Caribbean Environment for Seaside Geography by Mark Wilson. That is the book I use, but of course, I supplement it with my PowerPoint and my additional notes. In addition, I also use the New Integrated Geography, and that is by Sheldon Blesdell. I don't have a copy here with me. I think that one is at school, right? But that one gives so much more detail. But because you are preparing for exam and you don't want to have all this overload of information, you should have been using that all along to study. So the Caribbean Environment is more concise, right? The Caribbean Environment by Mark Wilson is more concise, and even better, you can go to www.geophysicxc. So I can um put down these links so that you all can check it out, www.geophysicxc.com. And this is a website that is actually, this website is actually approved by CXC, in that you can use the notes to study for your exam. So www.geophysicxc. I also have a website which is called www.sfgc.weebly.com, that you can also go to get notes, and YouTube. I like these two YouTube channel. I'm not too sure if you all came across it yet. Nat Ken Educational Services, and I believe that Nat Ken Educational Services. This person is, that's YouTube, right? Nat Ken Educational Services. It's a Jamaican teacher, and her content is really, really good content. Do y'all use any of these sites? Have y'all come across them? Y'all came across them before in your studying, or is it your first time coming across them? Yeah, she is really a good teacher, right? Also, There's another one that I just came across. Um, I think it's called Caribbean Geography, right? Let me see if I can find it because it's not coming up. I think it's called Geography World. Geography World. Yes, Geography World. And they are both, I believe, Jamaican teachers, and they are very good for studying. So, good, Calicia, you are on the right path, right? And once you study wise and smart, you will do very well. So, nothing to be, being a little bit anxious or nervous is normal. It's part of the process of taking exams. So don't feel like that you're the only person. Even myself, I myself get a little bit nervous when I have to take exam. So at this point I would say go for the most concise um, book that you have, and in this case the one that we use for school is the Caribbean Environment by Mark Wilson. www.geo for CXC is good for making notes if you want to study from cue cards. It's also very concise. Natkin Educational Services, she goes through a lot of past papers, so you can go there to get help with the past papers. Geography World is also a new channel, and she has been doing some of the broad topics that is going to come for exam. So she's looking at covering the broad topics, and she's looking at the human system, which is very, very, very good because a lot of y'all in the exam, the hardest portion of the exam is sometimes the human system that deals with the explanation. So I would suggest that you check out those YouTube channel, right? So let's move along. So under human systems, um, so under weathering, do you all know the types of weathering? Do you all remember the types of weathering? So just a little revision. What is weathering? What is weathering? What is weathering? And when you're studying weathering, you have to put in a particular word in that definition, right? It is very, very important to put in that particular word. What is weathering? Okay, Faith, yes, you have chemical weathering, you have physical weathering, and you also have biological, or sometimes you would see it called biotic weathering, right? Three main forms of weathering, or three main types of weathering, right? So, Calicia, I wouldn't say the removal, because when we say removal, we really talking about like erosion. Erosion removes. So do not use the word removal, right? Weathering is the breakdown of rocks, right? Or the breakup of rocks. I like to say weathering is the physical breakdown or chemical alteration or change in rocks, right? In situ. In situ is very important, right? Weathering is process of rocks being no fade. So fade, weathering, and erosion is two different concepts, and I can really explain that probably in another live. So weathering is the actual breaking up or the change in chemical composition or chemical alteration of the rocks, right? Or the change in rock. Whereas you have the physical breakup, so breakup of the rocks through And some of the processes that they gave us would be like frost action, right, where you have freezing and thawing of the rock, right, actually causes the rock to expand. When water collects into the crevices or spaces in the rock, right, during the day, water collects in those crevices and spaces. What happens when temperature falls at night in cold climates? Of course, this water is going to become frozen. And if you ever, as a child, fill a bottle of water, a plastic bottle, and you put it in the fridge, you would notice that bottle water expands and rock sorry, ice expands by 9%. So in the rocks itself, this water expands or exerts a pressure on the rock and breaks up the rock. So do you understand what is physical? When we talk about physical weathering, is the actual breaking up of rock. So for example, you take a, a hammer, right? Let's say, and you break up the rock into pieces. That is the type of breaking up we're talking about, or breaking down. Whereas chemical weathering is different because it involves the chemical change or the chemical alteration of the rock, meaning the actual chemical formula of the rock now changes because it changes into a different state. So we have the process of carbonation that they usually gives us with limestone in limestone areas, where you have rainwater that falls through the atmosphere, right? In the atmosphere, picks up some CO2 and it changes it into what we call a weak carbonic acid. When that weak carbonic acid actually falls on limestone rock, it reacts or changes its state into what we say is it's now becomes a bicarbonate. So that's where we talk about the chemicals. So I can go in and do a revision on the topic of weathering, right? And then you have biological weathering, which can be in the form of a chemical process, right? Or physical but biological in the sense that it is flora or fauna that changes the rock or break up the rock or change the rock. Do you understand that? For example, roots of a tree growing. So if you look at huge, tall trees with large, wide roots, buttress roots, and they're growing, they pry or they grow, and sometimes because their roots are so large, they actually break up or protrude outwards onto the surface and break up the ground. So in that way, that is a biological weathering process, right? But in this sense, it's a physical, in the physical form. Then you have biological, where you have like organism that release um, secretions, right? That can that actually can react with the rock itself and changes it into another state. Do you all understand this? Is this making sense to you, Calicia? Faith, is it any clearer in terms of what weathering is? So weathering is the actual break up of the rock in situ, meaning in that particular place, right? It does not move in that particular place. It's not moving at all. Nothing is being eroded away. It's just breaking up the rock, changing the chemical composition of the rock. Whereas erosion is where you have the agents of erosion like wind, water, waves, gravity, ice. These agents of erosion actually now moves the material. So erosion involves some sort of movement and takes it away. Yes. Yes. So, yes, Lennis, in that particular place. So, in situ, it's meaning it does not move. It's right there. Whereas erosion now, when the rock is not broken up, it can now take it away by the agents of erosion. Ice, water, waves, wind can now remove it, or it's now moved by the agents of erosion. Is that clear? Is that clear? I hope it is, so that you all will have an idea when you're studying how to study, right? So that is the natural system, and the natural system is fairly one of the straightforward section of the exam. The other section, in terms of broad topics that they gave you, it's the human environmental system, but it falls under the natural system section. It's natural hazards, and I think you all are getting a really nice deal with this exam, because natural hazard is something that you have been doing, especially if you did geography in lower school. You would have done it for so long that you can even pay attention to what is happening now and around you, and can sort of answer the questions if you don't know. But remember to go to the pages that I gave you, the websites and the YouTube page. So, natural hazards and disaster, and that is under specific objectives 28, 29, and 30. You have to know. So you see, distinguish between a natural hazard and a disaster. So what is a hazard and what is a disaster? What is a natural hazard and what is a disaster? How do you distinguish between them? What is the distinction, in other words? Okay, so number 28 on the specific objective is distinguish between a natural hazard and a disaster. So my question to you is, what is this distinction? What is a natural hazard and what is a disaster? And I'm sure that this question going to come. This question comes all the time, right? Hi, Michaela. Nice to see you. How are you doing? Excellent definition, Michaela. Right? So, a natural hazard is an unpredictable event, and I like that you actually use the word event, because an event, right, is what leads to a natural hazard, and that natural hazard can potentially become a disaster, right? So when we're looking at natural hazards and disaster, we often look at what is the event that leads to the natural hazard that could potentially cause a natural disaster. So not all events leads to a natural hazard, right? And not all natural hazard leads to a natural disaster. So I love your definition. It's natural hazard is an unpredictable event from the physical, and physical meaning our environment around us, biotic in terms of flora and fauna, and climatic, right? Um, Meaning our atmosphere, right? That threaten human life, property, and also, Michaela, adding the environment. So it's not just about us. It's not about just human life and property, but it also threatens the environment. And that is also very important. I am tired. Honestly, I am tired. It has been a long term, but I love teaching, and I like when I come online and I can interact with you all. So I'm saying, let me just do a quick sort of like, tips to study so that I can help you all prepare for the exam. Right? So, very good. So, an event, let's talk about events. What do you think an event is? What is an event that can possibly lead to a natural hazard? So give me an example of an event that can possibly lead to a natural hazard. So adding human life and property and the environment to that, Makila. Okay, so an event. Let's talk about what's an event. What is an event that can lead to a natural hazard? Give me an example. Let's talk about an example. So let's talk about the events that result in earthquakes and volcanoes. Right. So, Michaela, earthquakes, volcanoes, right, and wildfires, those are natural hazards themselves. But an event, right? An event would be plate tectonics. So, plate tectonics, the shifting of the Earth's plates, right? In terms of the convergent plate boundaries where plates are converging towards each other. At the transform plate margin where plates are sliding past each other, you can have earthquake activity, or when they converge and also when they diverge, you can also have earthquake activity. You also have volcanoes forming at convergent plate boundaries and divergent plate boundaries. So the event is plate tectonics, and plate tectonics can lead to earthquakes, volcanoes. Excellent, Janika. Janika, I don't think I ever see you on the live before. Nice to meet you. Which school do you attend and where are you from? Nice to meet you. So, heavy rainfall is the event that leads to what is the natural hazard that heavy rainfall leads to, or hazards in this case. Flooding, and also another natural hazard could possibly take place. Good, Calician Faith, excellent. Signal Hill, nice to be go in the house. Nice, nice to have you here. So heavy rainfall will lead to flooding and landslides. Ciara, nice to meet you, Ciara. Where, where, which school do you attend and where are you from in the country? So, hurricane, well, hurricane doesn't really, the event that leads to hurricane is not heavy rainfall. Heavy rainfall is a is what is caused by hurricanes, right? Hurricane causes rainfall. right? Heavy rainfall, or results, I should say, in heavy rainfall, right? So, in terms of hurricanes, anybody know what is the event that causes hurricanes, or how, in this case, you have to think how hurricanes are formed. What is the event? What do you need for a hurricane to take place? Trinidad and SFESS. What is that? Where is that? Sierra, what school do you go to? Is that a school? So heavy rainfall leads to flooding and landslide, but not hurricanes. The event that causes hurricane is what? What is the conditions that has to be satisfied for a hurricane to take place? Anybody know? Temperature in terms of what, Janika? Very good. The temperature of what? San Fernando East Secondary. Okay, great. Nice to have you with us. Temperature of what? What? Evaporation, right? Of warm water, warm ocean water, right? So warm water, right, by the process of evaporation, right? So when temperatures are higher and the ocean becomes warmer, right, that is very important. And that is how hurricanes actually develop. So hurricanes develop over warm ocean currents, right? Over warm ocean water, sorry, where you have evaporation taking place, and then it goes up into the atmosphere. And of course, what happens is that when this particular evaporation takes place, you have a condition where now you have certain wind speeds, right? And for it to be classified as a hurricane, of course, it has to be, the wind speed has to reach a certain speed to be classified as a hurricane. And then, of course, it continues into category one, category two, three, four, five. Hi, David. Nice to see you. You're learning geography, right? So that is that is what we refer to as the event. So the event leads to the natural hazard, and the natural hazard leads to the disaster. So what is the disaster? I think somebody this gave me the answer. So Michaela had it correct. A disaster occurs when a hazard results or it causes death, loss of life, injuries, and serious property damage, right? Or damage also to the environment. So do not forget how the environment is very important. And if you look at objective 29 under the specific content, you would see describe the impact of earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, landslide, flooding on the physical and human environment. So you're looking at physical in terms of the physical environment, right? So, an earthquake, in terms of the physical environment, how does that impact on the physical environment, right? And then the human environment. So, when we talk about the human environment, Michaela, you are really zoning in on the human environment when you discuss property damage, right? So, when you talk about property, right, property damage, or how it impacts on us, that is the human environment. But the physical environment is is our natural environment. So let us let us look at that. Let us look at it. So earthquakes, let us take earthquakes. What is the impact of earthquake on the physical environment? Give me an example. The impact of earthquakes on the physical environment. And then give me an impact of earthquake on the human environment. And of course, it's specific to the Caribbean because your exam is a Caribbean exam. So give me an example of how earthquakes impact on the physical environment and how earthquakes impact on the human environment. Drop your answers in the comments. Okay, Ciara is saying in the human environment, loss of housing, homes, lives, jobs, right? Um, yes, Ciara, that's fine. Why did you take it off? That's good. So, in the human environment, of course, you can have damage to your property. For example, your windows can be shattered or broken, right? You can have your valuables in your house that become destroyed. The infrastructure in your home can be weakened. For example, you see cracks that are now visible on the house, right? And what we say, there are primary impacts, right? And then secondary impacts of earthquakes. So primary is what happens immediately when the earthquake strikes. So like ground shaking, and that ground shaking is physical, right? Where you have windows shattering, that is also primary because that is immediate and that is on your on the human environment itself. And then, of course, then you have secondary hazards, like Michaela is listing a lot of the secondary hazards. Excellent. So, secondary hazards in that earthquakes can result in landslides. So, when an earthquake takes place, and of course, there's this shaking that is so intense, you can lead to landslide and rock falls, right? Because depending on the particular environment. You may have large loose material that may become loose. Tsunamis, especially if it takes place in the ocean, right? An earthquake takes place in the ocean. The potential of a tsunami happening is really great, especially like in the Pacific or in the Caribbean where we are literally, islands, right? We are islands. Liquefaction. And what is liquefaction? Michaela is using soil liquefaction, right? So soil liquefaction is also a physical impact, and those are really the secondary hazards. So what is soil liquefaction? Danica, very good. No, in terms of earthquakes, Danica, in terms of the, scorches the land, burning away the vegetation, no. Remember, earthquake is not a cause of earthquake. Fires is not a direct cause of earthquake, so you can't say that, right? It's more of a secondary hazard. So, for example, if you have um, electrical poles falling that probably would ignite and cause fires, that is a secondary hazard, and that is how it results in fires that can possibly destroy vegetation. But I don't want you to use that point as in saying in the physical environment it scorches the land, because it's saying like the earthquake directly scorches the land, which would be incorrect. So it is from or through the secondary hazard, right, of fires taking place by fallen electrical poles, you can have fires that can destroy the vegetation. Does that make sense to you, Danica? But excellent destruction of habitat is a good physical environment point, impact on the physical environment, because of course when you have an earthquake it can cause trees to fall, especially older trees that are probably weak. It can cause, if it's at near the coast, right? You can have coastal erosion through the big waves that are coming in due to the earthquake activity, right? On land, of course, you have trees that are falling may destroy habitats. Excellent. Um, Earthquakes do not lead to volcanic activity. So you can't say that, right, Janika? But definitely the ones that Michaela listed, so you can make note of those. Those are secondary hazards. Landslide, rockfall, tsunamis, etc. Right? Human environment would be, of course, how it impacts on the humans and property, right? For example, when buildings fall, right? Or buildings and structures become weakened, people people may be injured, right? All of those things, glass broken in a building. Very good, Michaela. Right? So soil liquefaction, and she said basically the shaking causes the soil to behave like a liquid and cannot support the building. So what happens? Soil liquefaction is really common along the coast. It is common on reclaimed land. What is reclaimed land? Right? Reclaimed land is land that was once sea that is backfill. Backfill meaning you put gravel, you create large boulders, and you build it up to become land, right? So on the coast where there's water, or on land that is reclaimed, like our entire city, Port of Spain, our capital, is on reclaimed land, right? Land which was once sea. What happens to that is when you have an earthquake of a very large magnitude, that shaking of the of the land, right? Or of the earth causes, as Makila says, the soil or the land to behave like a liquid. And of course, it becomes now in this liquid form because it becomes like a mud flow. So it mixes, the water mixes with the soil or the land, and that is what we refer to as soil liquefaction. And now it sort of cause what we call like this mud flow, right? And the entire building itself could collapse. So this happened in Mexico a couple times. Do you all understand? Is that making sense now? Right? So you do the same thing for all in terms of hurricanes, physical impact on the physical environment, impact on the human environment. So you describe for all of the hazards that you have there: hurricane, volcanoes, landslide, flooding, and we went through all of the events. So you go to the different sources that you have and you study that. And the last part on the hazards that is taken from the broad topic is explain the responses. And the response to the hazard, you can have an individual response, you can have a national response, and you can have a regional response, right, to the effects. So importantly, how do individual respond to natural hazard? Do you know how individuals can respond? How can you respond to natural hazard? Let us say, for instance, you and your family or the home that you come from. How can you respond to a hazard. So this part of the question covers preparedness, right? And the disaster management cycle. So this is very, very important. So the disaster management cycle consists of four main stages, right? So you have preparedness, you have mitigation, then you have the response, and then you have recovery. So we're looking at responses here. How do individuals respond to hazards? How do individuals or how can individuals respond to the natural hazard? To reduce the effects of the natural hazards and the disasters identified. So on an individual level, we can have what we call disaster preparedness and you can have mitigation, right? So disaster preparedness is basically um, getting ready for the potential threat of the hazard or being ready for the potential threat of the hazard. And it also involves implementing an emergency plan. So your response to the hazard or the disaster in this case will include an emergency response. So an emergency plan, right, would be the response in the event of the natural hazard taking place. And preparedness would be those things that you do before to be prepared for when this potential hazard takes place. So the emergency plan should involve things like a master point, right? Um, so, in the event that a earthquake takes place, do you have an emergency plan for your household? Right? Where are you all going to muster? So, what we call a muster point is basically an area that is designated for people to meet so that when the event happen, people won't get lost and they will know where to go. And when you go to that muster count point, sorry, you usually do head counts and things like that. So in your family preparedness plan, your emergency plan should have a muster point, right? You should also know how to respond in terms of implementing the duck cover, hold on, right? Do you go under um a door frame, right? An evacuation route, excellent, right? To get to the muster point, right? Supplies that you have to take with you. Very good. Do you have like a clear plastic bin to store all or waterproof clear plastic bin to store all your important documents with you? And I want you all to go to the ODPM ODPM, ODP, ODPM. What does it ODPM stand for? Anybody know? I know most of y'all have Instagram and Facebook. So if you go to Instagram on the ODPM site, which is the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, they outline, they have a really excellent outline of what a disaster preparedness plan should look like and an emergency plan, right? So I want you to go to that site and read through the informatics that they have because it's very short and it's concise. So it gives you all the information that you should have in that disaster preparedness plan and your emergency plan. Very good, Sierra, right? So the supplies. So that you would have in the bag. So you should have a small bag, that you should take with toiletries. You should have canned food, etc. You must educate the family on how to respond. You must also have a muster point and, of course, supplies. Excellent job, Ciara. Right? So that is individual. So individual should have this prepare this plan which should include or which should have an emergency plan. It should include an emergency plan and as well as mitigation measures. So things like reinforcing structures from before, right, is important, right? Removing things that could fall or removing things from high that can possibly fall. So you prepare in advance. The national agency responsible for natural hazards and disasters in Trinidad and Tobago is Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management. So I want you all to take down that the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, and I ask you to just go on their website and you would see what are their roles and responsibilities. And you need to know that because that is what they're going to ask you on the exam, right? How how does the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management handle the response to natural hazards and disaster management in Trinidad and Tobago? And then our regional body is called CIDARA, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Response Agency. So go to, again, go to Instagram. So go to Sidara, take it down, and again go through their roles and responsibility, right? And how they handle natural hazards and disasters in the Caribbean. Take, for example, La Soufre. I want you all to study the case study of La Soufre. So when you get the exam and they ask you for an example of a Caribbean country, you can use the St. Vincent case study because it's so recent and you would have an idea of all what was the potential hazards like the ash falls that took place and what was the Caribbean agency role in that SIDARA, right? So you need to study from your specific objectives 28, 29, and 30 for natural hazards, right? Under content, it gives you specifically all that you have to study. So um, for rocks, you need to study the rock cycle in terms of the formation of igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic, right? You need to study weathering and in detail, and weathering, you must state that it is in situ, meaning in that particular place, it does not move. you study again chemical, physical, and biological weathering, and you must know the causes and results of mass movement in terms of a slow movement, which is soil creep, and a fast movement, which is landslides, right? It gives you all that you need to study under the natural hazard systems as well. So you have to identify areas in the Caribbean that are risks from the hazards of hurricane, volcano, landslide, flooding, and the effects of them, long term and short term effects. So you would be studying all of that under the syllabus, right? I want you to pay attention to that. Then the last topic covered under the broad topic, very important, I want you all to note is the Caribbean. You have to know the Caribbean. So if you don't know the Caribbean by now, I suggest that you go to Lizard Point or see, I think it's Sierra, and this is a website that has a game, right? A game where you can actually study the Caribbean, and it will help you learn the Caribbean very fast. So it helps you with pinpointing the location of different countries. So you should know the Greater Antilles from the Lesser Antilles. You should know that the Lesser Antilles is an archipelago of volcanoes, what we call a volcanic island arc, whereas the Greater Antilles is composed of limestone, right? You should know which islands are the Windward Islands, which are the ones to the south, and then the ones further north is the Leeward Islands in the Lesser Antilles archipelago. So those to the south are the Windward, and you should know which country marks off Windward from Leeward, right? So it's Dominica, go down, which we call the Windward Islands, and then above that is the Leeward Islands. And you look at the Great Antilles. You look at those countries that are volcanic in nature, those that are not volcanic in nature. Um, then I am just looking up the site. Hi, Jassy. Good afternoon. How are you? I am going to put it in the chat right now. I'm going to put it. Let me just get the link. So you have quite a few of them. I'm gonna put it up now. And it helps you to study the Caribbean very quickly. Good afternoon. How are you today, Jassy? Nice to have you on. You can let me know if you get onto the site. That's okay. It's okay to not be fine. Earlier, Calicia was saying she's a bit nervous, and that's okay to be nervous. I know you all are probably tired by now. We had a very long term. Um, and of course, you all have been preparing for a very long time. So I definitely understand if at this point you're tired. CXC have you on bed rest? Oh no. I hope you get well soon. Very soon. And it's nothing too serious. But listen, if you all need to take a break, it's okay. Remember, it's okay to take a break. Take a 2 hours, do something that would, you know, help you to distress, because stress is something that can make you sick. So you don't want to stress out to the point that you get sick and then you may not be able to sit the exam. So remember to please get some rest and do something to help you relax, right? So I think you all should have all of them by now. Let me know. Right? So these are some websites that you can use to help you study the Caribbean. If you don't know them, the Caribbean islands and its location, and they come in quite handy, right? I use it in my classes to help the students learn the Caribbean fast. There's one more I should put there for you all, and you all should get it. So, Jassy, get some rest. Okay, very good. So you have to know the Caribbean. We just spoke about that. You also need to know the difference between a renewable and non-renewable resources. You're welcome, darlings. Well, you're welcome. Renewable and non-renewable resource, right? So what is a renewable resource? What is a renewable resource? So for your exam, you're going to have to study from for under human system. You're gonna need to start studying from objective 8, A and B, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? So up to 12 and 13. So you have quite a bit to study under the human section. So under the human section, you're starting to study from 8, A and B, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? Because for your a resource, okay, so a renewable resource, right? Janika and Calicia, excellent. So I don't like the term reuse, but it is a resource that can be, yes, it can be reused over and over. But I like Calicia's definition where she says it is a resource that can replenish itself, or it can be renewed, right? It can replenish or reuse or renewed, right? So it does not finish. However, it can become degraded, right? Because sometimes the rate at which we use it is faster than the rate at which it can replenish itself. Or I am looking at the syllabus. So your syllabus, because today I'm just doing some study tips for the exam, right? And just getting you all on the right path on how to study for the exam. So we are now on the human system, which is the last thing that we will be doing now for today. And you all really have to study a lot under the human system section. So from 8A, because you doing renewable resources and economic activities, and they want you to look at industries, right? So in terms of economic activities, so it is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, 12, 13, those objectives you have to study, right? So very good, Ciara. Right, renewable resources examples. She gave examples, so like solar energy, right? So the sun. So a renewable source would be the sun, wind, water. Very good. Forests, right? So it is a resource that can replenish itself, or it replenishes itself, or it can be replaced, as Kalicia is saying, or it can be reused, as Janika is saying. Very good, right? And a non-renewable resource is, so although it cannot be depleted, Michaela, just to note this, it can become degraded to the point where it takes a very long time to replenish, because we are using it at a faster rate than it is replenishing. Do you understand that, Michaela? So a resource can become, it can possibly become degraded, right? A renewable resource. But a non renewable resource is the opposite of that. It's a resource that cannot be replenished, and of course it can be depleted. So a non-renewable resource is a resource that cannot replenish itself or be replaced, and it can be depleted. Give me some examples of non-renewable resources. Okay, good, Nikila. Give me some example of non-renewable resources. Just you with me now? So I just have up the syllabus and going through what you all should be studying, and just asking you all some key things so that you will know how to study. Natural gas. Hi, Grace. It's nice to see you, Grace. Right? It's a resource that is finite, meaning, right? Meaning it is limited in its supply, and over exploitation can cause it to eventually run out. Example, bauxite, natural gas, or oil. Excellent, gold, right? Minerals, fossil fuels. Non-renewable cannot be renewed since it's for million of, and very good, Sierra, right? So fossil fuel, coal, natural gases. So we have a good idea of the distinction between renewable and non-renewable. Then they get into economic activity. What is economic activity? Or you need to identify countries in the Caribbean with these renewable and non-renewable resources. So you have to identify in the exam countries in the Caribbean with these renewable and non-renewable resources. So for example, where do you find bauxite? Which Caribbean country or countries do you have bauxite readily available? So we know, for us from Trinidad and Tobago, we know oil and natural gas, right, is found here. But let us say bauxite, minerals like gold. Where do you find gold? Minerals like gold, Jamaica, very good, bauxite in Jamaica, and also Guyana. Excellent, Calicia, excellent. You all are doing so well, very well. What about gold? Right? And renewable resources, gold is also found in Guyana, and yes, Nika, also Suriname, but mostly Guyana has a lot of gold, right? It is known for gold in Caribbean. So you have to identify countries with these resources. We know that renewable resources are readily available in all islands or in all countries because it is our things like our water, the sun, right? Forests. Yes, Calissa, Guyana is correct. Very good. So, economic activities. Now we're going to economic activities. What are economic activities? You have economic activity. What is an economic activity? And then economic activities are classified as primary, secondary, and tertiary. What are economic activities? Economic activities. Anybody got to economic activities yet? What are economic activities? Okay. So the process of using raw materials or an input in order to produce a product or service. Good, Calicia. It is the way that individuals or like a country produces, distributes, or consumes goods and services. Good. So economic activity basically is anything that we consider useful that we use to earn a revenue, right? Or to make a livelihood, right? Or to make a livelihood or to earn a revenue. So when we say livelihood, people people right earn or makes livelihood for themselves, for example, from fishing, utilizing of course fish fishes in the sea, right? So fishing, right? So that would be a primary economic activity. And in terms of revenue, in terms of earning revenue for a country, would be like where we now take these fish, for example, like countries who are big on fishing, they ship like tuna and trade tuna or salmon, right? And they trade these fish, they earn a revenue in that way, right? So it is anything or any material that we use to earn a livelihood or generate revenue for a country. Do you all understand that? So that is what an economic activity is. Do you all get that? So you all are very well on the right path, right? In terms of producing a product or goods and services, and it can also be services. So it's not just a good or a product, it's also services. For example, the tourism industry is a service industry, and that falls under what type of economic activity. So tell me what is a primary activity, what is a secondary activity, and what is a tertiary activity. Very good. So primary activity, secondary activity. So what is a primary industry, a secondary industry, and a tertiary industry? And give me an example of a primary activity, secondary activity, and a tertiary activity. Excellent. So primary fishing, agriculture, forestry, and lumbering, right? Extraction of oil and natural gas is also primary. Extraction of minerals like quarrying, right? Through quarrying, gravel and sand is also primary. But how do you find primary industry or the primary sector? How do you define that? Excellent, Calicia. So primary mining, you have fishing, agriculture, all those that I just called out. Secondary, you have food processing or so for the exam, they usually in the secondary industry they give you two choices. You can do the food processing or another type of industry, right? So industry in terms of food processing industries. Tertiary deals with like tourism. Excellent, Janika. Primary industries deals directly with the earth's natural resources. Excellent. So it deals with the use or the extraction or utilizing the earth's natural resources in its raw state, right? So it is the raw material. Very good, Jassy. Candula are the sector that produces raw materials, right? Where you utilize the raw materials. Good. Okay, so Michaela, don't confuse primary with manufacturing. So you can't say primary or manufacturing activity. That's not correct. So you have to say primary industrial sector is where you extract or you utilizes the earth's natural resources. So it provides or utilizes the raw materials of the earth, right? So you can't use manufacturing there because secondary industry deals with the manufacturing or processing or assembling. You understand that? So primary is the first stage in the production process, which involves the exploitation of natural resources. That is excellent. So just take out all manufacturing from there and say primary activity is the first stage in the production, which involves the exploitation of the earth's natural resources. It provides the raw materials for the manufacturing or production stage. Excellent. Process secondary, Sierra, processing of raw materials, yes, the processing or manufacturing or assembling, right, such as construction. So in this case, construction a lot of the time has to do with assembling, right? So like putting together a car has to do with assembling as well, and not necessarily um, right. So construction and engineering, so secondary industry has to do with the processing of the raw materials into a finished good. It is the second stage in the production process, right? Raw materials to add value to them. Excellent. So secondary industry deals with the manufacturing of products from the manufacturing of the raw materials, right? From the primary industry. Excellent. And tertiary involves catering to the needs of people in the society, right? So it involves providing services where people are the main resource. Excellent. So tertiary industry, tourism, insurance, restaurant, healthcare. So the NICA not necessarily taking the secondary products and selling it, but it has to do with the service industry. It is where people provide a service or caters to the needs of people in the society. So even garbage collectors, right? Taxi drivers, a teacher, right? Doctors, lawyers, accountants, all of these deals with service, people in the hotel industries. Do you all understand that? Everyone is clear? Is it clear to you all? Very good. Those answers were all excellent. Very, very good. You all are on your way, right? So that is the primary, secondary, and tertiary. And for each one now, so you would see number nine, it tells you on the objective to explain the importance of each sector, right? In terms of primary, secondary activities to the Caribbean. So you have to know each industry and give a Caribbean example, right? They ask you about how natural resources are used for commercial purposes, name and locate these areas, factors influencing the location of the primary, secondary industries, and also the factors that influence the development and growth of the tourism industry. So that is all of that you have to study from the syllabus for that section of your exam. So when you get into the primary, secondary, tertiary, remember that you have to give names and location, right? Just how I asked you all where bauxite is, where you would find oil and gas, you have to remember countries, and it's like a small case study that you would study, that you develop and give in your exam. So you have to give the characteristics of the industry and the importance of them. And for each one, right, for example, you would see under the factors, you have raw materials, you have energy, you have transport, you have market, labor, capital, role. You have to know each factor, how it influences the industry. So for your exam, for the primary industry, you have to choose from either fishing or forestry. So fishing, the case study you can use is Belize, that is in your book, and forestry, you can use Guyana, you can use also Belize, right? Anywhere where there is large um, forest stands that is being used. But for the exam, the case studies you can use Belize, right? Which has, do you all know that Belize has the second largest barrier reef in the Western Hemisphere? And I did my master's in Belize. I did a master's in biodiversity conservation with sustainable development for the Caribbean with a focus on marine studies. So I actually studied fishes, herbivorous fishes like the parrotfish and acanthurids, and I studied their role in maintaining healthy reefs and how healthy reefs will help in the face of help um, the marine ecosystem in terms of climate change, combating climate change impacts. So Belize has the second largest barrier reef in the world and the only barrier reef in the western, the largest barrier reef in the western hemisphere. So that is good for you all to know for forestry. For fishing, sorry, forestry, you use Guyana. For secondary industry, you have oil and natural gas and bauxite. Of course, if you're from Jamaica, it might be easier to remember what is familiar to you. So you would use Jamaica for bauxite. For oil and natural gas, if you are from Trinidad, definitely use oil and natural gas Trinidad because you are familiar with it. You know where our oil refinery is or where they are located, like Point of Pierre, Petrotrin, which was once Petrotrin, but now they have closed, right? So you have to know those case studies there in your textbook. And next week we could go into more detail in the case studies. And then, of course, for industry, you have food processing industry in a CARICOM country. So in the book, there's a nice case study with Trinidad in the Sheldon Blaisdell New Integrated Book, and comparing Trinidad with Singapore. Do y'all know anything about Singapore? Do y'all know anything about Singapore? Anybody here ever had an interest in Singapore? No, Jesse. So I want y'all to, even if you have to study Singapore for your exam, right? Because in your textbook, again, there's a nice case study, and maybe next week, Monday or Tuesday, I can do this case study with the secondary industry comparing Trinidad with Singapore. There's an excellent case study in the new integrated geography from Mr. Sheldon Blesdell. But if you never, Singapore is actually smaller than Trinidad and Tobago. It's also an island, and it's smaller than Trinidad and Tobago. Do you know that up there? Okay, so I actually visited Singapore in 2019. Um, I love to travel. I don't know if I told you all that before, but I've traveled to, I think it's like 25 countries, and 15 of them are Caribbean countries that I visited. I love diversity. I love meeting people. I love eating food, exploring geographical features, geotourism. I just love everything about it, right? Experiencing new cultures. So I visited Singapore, and Singapore is, although it's smaller than Trinidad, their population is like 5 million. Can you imagine that? Trinidad is already so small. We're like 5,000 square feet, right? And we have a population of 1.3 million, probably close to 1.4 now with all of the migration that has taken place. But can you believe Singapore is smaller than Trinidad with a population of 5 million? It's crazy, right? But it is really developed. Like it's classified as a first world country or a developed country. It's in terms of technology, they are really, really advanced. It is so awesome. They have the world's best airports, hands down. You should check it out. It's called the Chani Jewel Airport. It's awesome. So if you can go to Instagram or you Google it, you would see this airport. So they're really, really advanced. So I will do this case study sometime next week because I know we have been on here for some time. So let's wrap up now. And then you have to look at the factors influencing the development of growth and growth of tourism. And again, in a Caribbean country. So you have to look at the physical factors, the historical factors, cultural factors, man made attractions, and the role of the government in tourism. And this is for the tourism industry. So I want you to look what case study can you use for tourism. You can also use Jamaica, Barbados, right? Those case studies. Have you all done those case studies in school? So for human, I think you'll have a lot more to study in the human broad topics than the physical. Is quite straightforward, and the human natural system question, which is on natural hazard, is very straightforward. But the human topic is very broad because they didn't say where from economic activity. They just stated resources and economic activity, which means you have to study all. And then you have to study the benefits and problems associated with each of the industries, right? So take some time, and also the solutions to these problems in the industry. So take some time and study the human topic over the weekend. So next week I can go through the human topic. What do you all think about that? So I want to do some more map work, and I want to start doing some little crash courses in the broad topic. I hope this was helpful today. Was it helpful? Tell me one thing that you learned today, or one thing that stood out to you today in today's session. So that is basically how you study. I want you to look at the syllabus, go to the back of the syllabus, find out the meaning. You will see the meanings listed for the terms used in your exam. Go through them, especially things like examine and analyze, explain, describe. Go through those meetings, take it with your syllabus, and then use a concise book to study. In this case, what do you want me to email Jassy? Tell me, and I will. Send me your email. Send me your email, or tell me what it is you want me to send for you. The syllabus, Jassy, it is in your syllabus. So behind the syllabus, it's like the last page, page 40, begins on page 46 to 48. It's called glossary, right, of geographical verbs used for the exam. Go through what they are, go through the different words in terms of what they mean, and also on the syllabus. That's the syllabus, Jassy. So if you go on Google, or go to www.cxc.org, go to cxc.org and download the syllabus. You would see it there. Also, another important tip for your exam. You all ever heard about the geography reports? I want you to go on the, let me see if I can pull it up here, on the www.cxc.org website. And when you go to the website, you would see the reports for geography over the years. Download the whole um, booklet. It's a booklet that has the specimen paper, the syllabus, and the reports. I'm going to put the link, Jassy, for you. When you download that, I want you to go through the reports for the past years of the exam, because the past years, right, of the exam, they actually tell you what answer they wanted for the particular question, and they give you sometimes model answers of how to answer this particular question. So go through the broad topics and look at these reports and see the question on your past papers for the different years, and then go to the reports and see what was the answer that they wanted. So they do it for most of the questions. They give you like what they wanted for the answer and it's also very helpful in answering the question. Also, you have the websites that I put up, Natkin Educational Services, which is a Jamaican teacher that goes through the past papers, and Geography World as well, go through past papers. So you all have a lot of resources that you can use. So let me look for this for Jazzy quick, and I'll put the link so if anyone else wants it, you can download it. It is free. So it will just tell you to it will tell you to download it. You can do that. I'm gonna put it now. So when you go to the site, cxc.org, you go under CSEC, and under CSEC, you would see the list of subjects come up. You click on geography. When you go to geography, you would see links. When you go to links, it says syllabus, specimen paper, mark scheme, and subject report. The subject report gives you the answer. It's very, very important. And you download it, and it has all the previous years and it gives you model answers of how you should have answered that particular question. Right? So I'm going to put it now in the chat. Tell me if it works. Is it working? Okay, so let me know, was today's session helpful? One thing you learned, one thing that stood out to you, and how you all are feeling. Are you all feeling a little bit more confident in going to study now? How to study, how to use the broad topics, how to use your syllabus, how to use the resources that you have. Oh, if you have the study guide, Jassy, that is very good. So even if you have the CSEC study guide, the CXC study guide for geography is also really, really helpful. And it's concise in terms of notes. So it will hit exactly what you need to know for the exam. So you can utilize that as well. All right, Michaela, thanks. Michaela, Jassy, Faith, Danica, Ciara, Calicia, Grace. Thanks all of you all for coming out. I hope you all had a good session, and we will have another session next week, please God. All right. Have a good day. Bye.